Welcome in. My name's Jason Priester, the Clemson Insider, and game week is finally upon us. Pretty soon, all the talking will be over, and we will know exactly what these two teams, Clemson and LSU, are going to put on the field. Saturday night, 7:30. We're actually less than a week away now. Man, I'm telling you, I think it's going to be an insane environment. I'm pretty sure it's the first time Clemson's hosted a top 10 matchup at home. I think since 2013, Georgia. And that night was crazy. Um, man, with all the hype surrounding this team and the way they've kind of been away from the national spotlight for the past few years, man, I just think it's going to be insane. I can't wait to see how raucous that crowd is. Before we get into it, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors over at A Glass. 2 locations right there in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. Take care of all your auto glass needs. They do replacement, they do repair. Give them a call today or get yourself a free quote online. myaglass.com, longtime sponsor of the show, only sponsor this show's ever had. Shout out to those guys. Very, very much appreciate it. Man, I'm telling you, they're just, I think there's going to be there's like, they're expecting so many people just from the media there, man. I think they've had to deny people access. I don't know that I've seen that since I've been doing this. Kind of same thing with the media parking, man. We're being advised to carpool and stuff just because they don't have enough spots. It sounds like it's gonna be crazy. Get to hear from Dabo tomorrow. Also, Garrett Riley and Tom Allen, if I'm remembering right, and then we'll hear from maybe a couple players tomorrow too, but probably the bulk of them on Wednesday. That's how they'll do it this year. They made that change last year. Instead of doing players on Mondays and Dabo on Tuesday, now they do Dabos on Tuesday, players on Wednesdays. I'm actually headed up there tonight. Be up there all week. So I'm available for dinner, man. Hit me up. Got a long list of recruits that are expected to be on hand. Some guys with offers, some guys without offers, looking for offers. It's going to be a star-studded list of recruits that'll be there that night. Just to give you an idea, excuse me, cornerback Josh Dobson, quarterback Jaden Bailey, running back Andrew Beard, running back Trey Segaro, 5-star linebacker Caden Henderson, linebacker Quentin Cypher, linebacker Jalathan Mayfield told me today he was coming, wide receiver Jamar Simmons, wide receiver Jaden Bryant, defensive end Santana Harvey, tight end Jackson Dollar, defensive end Rashad Street, safety Marquis Bryant, defensive lineman Seth Tillman, in-state wideout Jaden Kelly Murray, defensive lineman Jaden Worth, offensive lineman Elijah Hutchinson, big-time offensive lineman Reed Ramersher, offensive lineman Nate Carson, offensive lineman Jacob Burns, wide receiver Amari Patterson, and some 2028 guys thrown in there. 5-star Asher Gitto, quarterback Grayson Clary, in-state running back Michael Martin. I mean, it's a long list, man. Now that the game week is upon us, you can give me some of your predictions. Tell me what you're expecting to see, what you're hoping to see. I'm going to keep this tonight kind of mostly centered on the game. Not saying you can't ask anything else. You surely can. We'll see if we can get to it. But for the most part, we're going to keep this game centric. I'll tell you a couple of things, that have kind of been on my mind the past few days. I was having a conversation with somebody in the last week, and it was after yet another national title prediction had come in for Clemson. And I remember telling the guy, man, the hype train has not only left the station, it's kind of started to go off the rails a little bit. Um, you know, while I do think Clemson's got a lot of, veteran leadership on this team, man, I do think it's worth at least keeping one eye on whether these guys have been reading too many of their own press clippings. I lean towards thinking it's not going to be an issue, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. Because the praise, the hype, the expectations just keep getting higher and higher and higher. And we're talking about a team that returns about 80% of the production from last year, a team that suffered 4 losses last year, lost to all but one of the ranked teams that they played, and could not stop the run and couldn't really find any consistency on offense. And what I'm trying to say is it's a lot of the same guys. I actually asked Tyler Venables about that last week. It's the same group of guys on defense. What's going to be different this year? I thought he had a pretty good answer. We might have talked about that last week, but they've just got two things I'm looking for, one on each side of the ball. Got to be more consistent offensively. Just too many long lulls where they just couldn't do anything last year, where they'd be 4 or 5, 6 consecutive drives and they have a bunch of 3 and outs or 4 plays, 1 first down and a punt. You can't just show up for a half and sputter for a half and expect to win at the level this team's expected to win at. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the easy things to say is stop the run. That's the easy thing, but be better against the run. But, man, this defense had its issues across the board last year. The run defense gets focused on a lot, but the pass defense, I think it finished ranked outside the top 70 or top 60 nationally. A far cry from what it was the year before that. But what I want to see is this defensive front that features so much talent take over, or let's not even say take over, but win a battle at the line of scrimmage against a team that's having to replace 4 starters from last year. To me, that is the biggest key to this game. Clemson's defensive line has to win the battle, line of scrimmage. If you give Nussmeier too much time back there, those receivers are going to eat they'd eat any secondary up. It's not necessarily about your secondary being no good. That's just how good some of those receivers are. Clemson fans should be plenty familiar with Barry and Brown. He's there now. Nick Anderson, who missed most of last season with an injury, but had a really big year the year before. So the defensive front has to win the battle at the line of scrimmage. Main improvements that I want to see, the big. I just hit on the two. I just hit on one of them. Man, I want to see more consistency with the offense, and I think a lot of that starts with Klubnik. Don't get me wrong; it's not all of him, but it's going to start and stop with him. He's your senior quarterback. Anything that goes right or wrong, it's going to be on his shoulders. You got a very, very deep group of receivers. You got a couple of tight ends who, albeit a little bit inexperienced, man, they got some talent there. And, they should have more depth at running back this year, even with Maffa gone. But that's what I want to see. I want to see an offense that is more explosive on a more consistent basis. Y'all going to have to give me 1 second here. My apologies. All right, I'm back. My dog had gotten into something she had no business being in. But yeah, that's what I want to see, more consistency on the offensive side of the ball. Tiger Ronnie says the same thing. No prolonged dry spells from the offense. Yeah, if this team is going to be what they want to be, they have to be more consistent on offense, period. Do you think Sapp is less or more of a liability blocking versus Brenning Stool? OPH can't be taking all the snaps Saturday. Uh, I really haven't seen enough of Sapp to give a fair assessment there, but man, it's hard to be lacking more than Brenning Stool was when it comes to the blocking side of things. I would kind of expect to see a lot of Henry Saturday night, maybe with a little bit of Battencure mixed in. We'll see what the rotation ends up looking like. But I wouldn't be shocked to see a little bit of Sapp too. But I wouldn't be surprised if OPH doesn't get a majority of the snaps. Which team is more talented? Talent doesn't always win games. I think they're pretty comparable. And I think one thing with LSU, they added 18 transfers to that roster, 16 in the winter, 2 more in the spring, and a lot of those guys are expected to play big time roles this year. A lot of those guys are going to start, and even some of the ones that aren't starting are going to be key reserves. I think a big question for LSU is how does that team gel? That they've not played a game with each other yet outside of the exhibition in the spring. And a couple of those transfers weren't even there for that because, again, they came in the spring window. But so while the talent might be comparable, I do think one bonus for Clemson is, these guys have played together for some of them for 3 years now. There's probably, some of those offensive linemen in Klubnik that they're seniors, although Klubnik didn't play a lot as a freshman, but you can look at that Florida State from last year. That was a team heavily built on the portal, and they just were not very good. I'm not saying it's all because they didn't gel, but when you throw a bunch of different players in there like that from all these different schools and you don't spend a whole lot of time, you know, um, what's the word I'm looking for here? You don't spend a whole lot of time, let's just say, recruiting them and diving in, doing a deep dive into seeing exactly what kind of fit they are. It's more, I mean, we always hear portal recruiting being called speed dating because everything's amped up and it's so much quicker. So I think that's a thing worth monitoring. But I mean, go back 2 years ago, Florida State, that was another, big time portal team, and they went undefeated until they got to the postseason. But I just think when you rely that heavily on the portal, I don't think you always know what you're going to get from one year to the next. But I think talent wise, man, they're probably pretty comparable. There would probably be a spot here or a spot there that I would favor LSU, and then a spot here and a spot there I'd favor Clemson. Like, I think LSU's got a lot of talent on that offensive line, but again, they're replacing 4 starters. That's if you're an LSU fan, that's got probably your biggest concern coming into this game. Wondering how that offensive line is going to mesh and hold up against the Clemson defensive line, assuming they play up to the potential to play up to the level that we think they're capable of playing at. So, I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that. I sure hope the game is a little cleaner than the Iowa State Kansas game. Yeah, that's the downside to not having any, real no real practice games. You gotta line up, and the first time you're really going at it, it's a real game. The lights are on. You can try to simulate some of these environments in scrimmages in camp, but they're apples and oranges comparisons. Um, and different programs do them different ways. A lot of those scrimmages are controlled, some of them are less controlled. But Dabo's talked for years about how he'd be in favor of having a preseason game, and it'd clean up some of that sloppiness. It might not clean all of it up, but it'd clean up some of it because there was definitely some sloppiness, and I would expect to see that in a lot of these openers. Maybe not all of them, but a good bit of them. I would fully expect that probably both these teams Saturday night, Clemson and LSU, will have a bump in the road along the way at some point. Just something that comes down to season opening jitters or first game, whatever, first game sloppiness, however you want to term it. But I am in the corner of, preferring having a preseason game, and with the SEC now going to 9 games, you can fully expect the ACC to follow suit. That'll probably do away with a lot of these FCS games, which kind of sucks for those schools because, a lot of their athletic department is funded based off these games. But maybe at some point in the not too distant future, you can have those type of games as your spring game or some kind of exhibition or practice game or preseason game in August. That would be the route. That's the route I prefer they take. But the NCAA has never been, accused of being very proactive. Clemson and Louisville. Oh, I'm talking about a top 10 battle season opener to start the season. Yeah, there's been some other top 10 battles at Clemson since then. I just meant as a season opener. Do I think LSU will win? I've been pretty, I've remained pretty steady in saying that I think Clemson's going to beat LSU. Nothing's I've not seen anything, heard anything, or feel anything differently to change my mind. If you want I'll give a score prediction and all that stuff later this week. But LSU's lost 5 openers in a row. 5 in a row. I mean, Clemson's lost 2 in a row as well, but LSU's dropped 5 straight. They have really put a lot of emphasis on this game. Brian Kelly's had the tiger paw plastered all up in the facility over there. Got 1-0 plastered everywhere. He even had the faces of some Clemson players put up on certain things, if what I was told is true. They are kind of treating this thing as a 1-game season, and sometimes that backfires. Maybe it doesn't here, but sometimes it does, and you put too much emphasis on a game instead of just treating it like the next game or just another game. It's definitely an interesting strategy, but I'm of the opinion that I've been pretty steady the past 3-4 weeks to saying that I think Clemson's going to win. I think it's going to. If I was a betting man sitting right here today, I'd probably go with the under, just because it's an opening game and there might be some sloppiness. But I think Clemson's going to win a close one. I read there could be over 30 NFL scouts, maybe half a dozen GMs on site. Another reason why there's not quite as much room up there in that press box area as there typically is during a home game. Cole's got his prediction in 35-27 Clemson. Check out Naheem Burrows' highlight. Yeah, he had a pretty good game for himself there last week. One crazy play where he scored on a little reverse type deal or a pitch back or whatever it was. He'll also be here Saturday night. A few of his teammates are coming. 2028 quarterback Luke Tolan, 2028 defensive lineman. He's a 5-star. Asher Gitto, and 2028 receiver Camden. I forget how to say his last name. Teets or something like that. I think it's Titze. Think all the trash talk this team received from the media for the last 2 years will motivate them. I think this team comes out with a chip on their shoulder. This should be a win. I mean, look, man, I think anything that was said about this team last year, they probably earned it. I mean, I don't know that I would call it trash talk. Particularly, the criticisms about the defense. Then you go back 2 years, and there was a lot of criticism surrounding Klubnik and the offense, and I think those were kind of earned too. I'll tell you what I think motivates this team. I think the way they played on defense motivates them, particularly on the defensive side. I think they know that they did not play up their capabilities last year. I think a lot of these guys, or at least a few of these guys, know that this is their money year. Several of them, in fact. And it's kind of now or never. I go back to that Tyler Venables interview where he talked about the scars the defense suffered last year just from, not playing up to the standard that's in place at Clemson, and kind of how it's been used as fuel for motivation this year. So to me, I think that's one of the biggest things that's going to put a chip on their shoulder, is to kind of prove that last year was not or some of the failures of last year on the defensive side were not because there's not talent on that side of the ball, and that it was more of just, an anomaly than anything else. I am most excited for that first defensive possession. I want to see the intensity they play with and cannot wait to hear what it sounds like with the crowd. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are anxious for that first possession. Just imagine if that first possession, LSU, who wasn't the strongest running team last year, breaks off a 40, 50-yard run on the first play from scrimmage, man, you could probably be able to hear a pin drop in that place. But to me, it's not about – anybody that listens to me knows that, to me, I understand why people get so focused on the intensity of this coach or that coach. Um, to me, if you need a coach to get you fired up to play, you're probably in the wrong business. Um, I think a lot of, again, I go back to what I said a minute ago. Um, I think results can produce intensity too. Um, but you can be as intense as anybody in the world and get run right over on a play. I just, all that to say that I wouldn't put too much stock into one play or two plays or three plays early in the game, man. Let the thing play out, see what happens. Matter of fact, I don't even know that I would put a whole lot of emphasis on one game. Win or lose, you got a new defensive coordinator in place. The defense is probably, the most likely path to success is probably improving from 1 week to the next, to the next, to the next. I don't think the defense is going to be as good week 1 as it will be in week 9 or 10 or 11. I think it's a journey, and I think it's going to take some time to get there. So I would just caution against putting too much stock into one series, one game, and letting some things play out. Want to see how we look without Mickens' biggest loss from last year. Yeah, that's a big one. Absolutely, man. He was the backbone of the back end of that defense for sure. Talking about somebody that got better, as time went on. Man, was he good last year. And if Khalil Barnes is not healthy, for week 1, even if they run him out there, if he's not, at least close to 100% healthy, man, that just kind of magnifies that loss. To me, that's outside of the the impact Tom Allen's going to have and how much he can improve those guys on that side of the ball. If we're just talking about a specific position on defense, yeah, that's one of the biggest questions. How do they replace RJ, particularly if Khalil is still kind of nursing that hamstring? Harris says Clemson wins 27-14. Who could have guessed? Justin, who says the Gamecocks are going to be scary good this year, predicts LSU 28-17. As he says, Clemson's not capable of beating a team from the SEC. Watched the replay of the ACC championship game the other night. I think there were 7 or 8 possessions between the second and fourth quarters where they looked bad. The Maffa injury didn't help. Cade looked like the first-year starter. Cade, way too much. He's got to prove he can process the things the defense is showing. The second half of that game is one example of what I'm talking about. But make no mistake, man, Maffa's injury magnified that. When teams know that you can't run the ball, and Clemson showed no ability to run the ball over, several games down the stretch, pretty much most of November and into December. It changes the way they can defend you. But yeah, Cade's got to be better, at seeing some things pre-snap. If you can have a competent running game, that's going to take a lot of the pressure off him. And I think he's got to be even more of a factor with his legs this year than he was last year. But that's also, when you're a quarterback and you're not Trevor Lawrence or one of those guys that comes in and is a superstar immediately. That's kind of the process for a lot of these guys. You want to see them get better from one year to the next, and that's an area where he needs to be better this year. Appeared that the offense was playing not to lose instead of playing to win last season. They come out with a different mindset this season. That's been a Dabo thing for a while. I won't necessarily say playing not to lose, but for so many years, he's been able. He knows he's had that defense that's been so successful year after year after year after year. He doesn't have to get overly aggressive on offense. He can let them do what they do, even get a little conservative at times and lean on that defense. And when they tried to do that last year, it blew up in their face. Garrett Nussmeier is not hurt. He was dealing with a little bit of tendonitis in his knee. That's it. He's good to go. Matter of fact, Brian Kelly said today that everybody would be available. LSU had to replace 4 starters from last year on their offensive line. Do I expect more than a couple of design runs or options for K? My gut says he'll be used a good deal, especially if the running backs can get rolling early. I think for the offense to be as good as it can be, that there probably need to be at least a handful more of design runs for Cade. But I also think he's got to be better at knowing exactly when to take off or when to run and when not to run, and exactly when to take off when he is going to run. I mean, it's little things. It's not like he really struggled mightily in that department last year, but I think there were times still where maybe he was a quarter second too long before he decided to take off, or maybe he didn't take off one time when he should have, or he did take off one time when he shouldn't have. But yeah, I would say, when Clemson was in the midst of those teams that made all those playoff runs in the bigger games, think how many times that Trevor ran against an Ohio State in the playoff, or Deshaun Watson ran against Alabama in those national title games. It would far more than he would, in other games, or the quarterback would in other games. So it wouldn't shock me to see him have a few more in this one. LSU travel early Friday morning. They usually come in on Thursday evening, afternoon, if I'm remembering right. Like last year when Helene rolled through, Stanford couldn't come in until Friday, like less than 24 hours before the game started. They were supposed to come in the day before. So I'm sure they would come in on Thursday. Doing away with the FCS games hurts the fans too, because it's the only game some of us can afford to. Yeah. Yeah, the average fan is definitely being priced out. That matter of fact, I was having this exact conversation with somebody earlier today, a friend of mine. He's a South Carolina fan, and they got the same thing going on over there. Um, Gamecock Club, kind of like Hip Tay, always calling everybody, saying you got to donate this much more if you want to keep your same parking, or we're going to move your parking, or whatever it is, or we're going to move you from the lower deck to the upper deck. It's definitely like it was, 10 years ago. Heck, I'll tell you when I quit, I used to get season tickets. And when I remember between the year, I think it was 2000 and 2001, they doubled in price. And I never bought another one again after that. Because they doubled in price just in one off season. But man, that's back when they cost like, I think they went up from $125 to $250. So that's back when they were pretty cheap during the early Bowden years. Think the backups will matter the most this game. Depends on what backups you're talking about. I wouldn't be shocked if the starters don't play a large majority of the snaps in this one. The running backs, I think Randall's probably going to get a bulk of the work. And we'll see how he does, man. That's a really good defensive front they've got. It's kind of been owning their offensive line and the practice, or that's the reports coming out of there anyways, that their defensive line's been having its way with their offensive line pretty much all the way throughout camp. Again, they're replacing 4 starters. So, I mean, that shouldn't be all that surprising. Man, they got a bunch of new pieces on that defensive line, too. They picked up the Peyton kid, or picked up, what's his name, Patrick Peyton, whatever his name is, the defensive end from Florida State. Golly, they picked up a couple more, too. Their names are escaping me, but they're going to have 2-3 new faces along that defensive line from transfers. But to me, that's one of the biggest things for the offense for Clemson, man. They got to find a way. They don't have to go out and rush for 150 yards, but they got to make LSU respect it. They can't do you can't have what they had in November last year and in the ACC championship game and in the playoff game where there was just the running game was non-existent. You got to at least have a semblance of a running game, at least enough to make them have to respect it. But as far as what the running backs are going to do, I'm kind of anxious to see that myself. I've heard all the right things about Randall throughout camp, all the way back through spring. I was not a big believer in that move originally, and I made that pretty clear. But the more, the deeper we've gotten into camp, and the more I've heard, the more my mind's changed. Speaking of fitting in, how is Tristan Smith fitting in? He seems to be fitting in really well. He seems to fit right in, to be quite honest. There's always this percentage of the fan base that believed that Dabo couldn't bring in players from the portal because they wouldn't fit Clemson's culture. Well, I think a player like Tristan Smith blows that theory out of the water. not to mention the fact Jeremiah Alexander, who they also signed in the portal. You're telling me 3 years ago when he was coming out of high school, he was a, a cultural fit. But once he went to Alabama and stayed there 3 years, he's no longer a cultural fit. I mean, that theory never made a whole lot of sense to me. But yeah, I think Tristan came in and made himself right at home. He talked last time we got to talk to him. He talked a little bit how he and TJ Moore kind of butt heads on the field sometimes, just the competitive nature of things. Man, it doesn't take long listening to him talk. You can tell he's found his home. And he's not going to be one of the guys that runs out there first tomorrow night or Saturday night. I'm sure that'll be Antonio, TJ, and Bryant Wesco. But I don't think it'll take long to see him, and I think you'll see him rotated in there on right regularly. Michael says 27-17 Clemson. Scott says 27-20 Clemson. Thomas has got it 28-14 Clemson. I think the most improvement is going to be on the defensive side. People forget most of these players had a top 10 defense the year before. They surely did, man. They were top 10 in several statistical categories, the year before last. Nationally, not just in the ACC. In West's second year, man, the pass defense was really good. The run defense was really good in his first year. It took a little bit of a step back in year number 2. They put a lot of attention on shoring up the pass defense because it was kind of up and down in his first year. But man, the defense was pretty good in year number 2 under West. You're right. There's a lot of these same guys that are on this defense now that were here 2 years ago. That's why that I'm kind of buying into the fact that last year was more of an anomaly that didn't have as much to do with who was on the field as it did to do with what was going on off the field. Ernie's got 31-17 Clemson. Tiger Time says Cade is going to light up hell as poo. I like that one. Steve says, I'm picking Clemson in this one by at least one touchdown, and with bet money, you're going to see a more physical Clemson defense with louder pad popping than any game last year. You know what? I think you might be on to something with that last part there, man. Just having, been to a handful of practices and seeing Tom Allen in action. Yeah, you might be on to something there. Travis says 31-24 Clemson. Neil says, I'm leaning towards a similar score to the Georgia game back in 2013, 34-30, something similar. Yeah, I can go ahead and tell you whatever my score prediction ends up being, it'll be close. I think the over might be safer. Both defenses were very subpar last year. Both have big jumps to make. Both offenses were less subpar, and both have even more potential this year. No, I don't disagree with any of that, except, my reasoning for leaning towards taking the under would be based more on the fact that this is a season opener. And I think there might be a little bit of a feeling out period, and it might be maybe not quite as high scoring as some people think. I'm also not a gambler either, but from national perspective, this one game is huge on one game stock. If Clemson loses, no ACC team they beat will it be considered an elite win. What if Clemson loses and Florida State beats Alabama. And Miami beats Notre Dame. And Georgia Tech wins whoever they're playing against, I forget, and Virginia Tech beats South Carolina by some miracle. What if a couple of those teams win their games, but Clemson loses? I don't think that the narrative around the ACC is going to focus on be centered solely on the result of this one game. I think there's several games this weekend that are going to play into that. Clemson wins if they rush for more than 100 yards and hold LSU to less than 100 yards on the ground. Clemson wins. LSU wins if they get the running game going and their offensive line wins the battle at the line of scrimmage and gives Nussmeier time to chew up Clemson's secondary, man, because I'm telling you, those are going to be the best group of receivers Clemson faces this season. You can make the argument it's the best group in the country. I don't know that there's any secondary out there capable of locking them down. It's going to come down to putting the pressure on the quarterback, keeping him inside the pocket, because while Nussmeier's not known to be a big runner, he's never really had to. I don't know if we really know how good of a runner he is. I definitely wouldn't suggest leaving a bunch of running lanes open, allowing him to escape and finding out exactly what kind of runner he is. You got to keep him contained in the pocket, not let him get comfortable, because if he does, it's going to be a long night. Yeah, I don't watch College Game Day at all anymore. So I didn't see anything about Corso. They screwed the pooch there anyways. They should have had his last game being the Florida State game, seeing as, his ties to Florida State. My thoughts on Ricardo Jones. Oh man, I've been talking him up since probably since the start of the year. I don't know, for a while now. We didn't see a ton of him last year. We saw a little bit, and he flashed in what little we saw. I think you're going to see a lot of him this year. I think he and Ronan Hannafin, or you're going to see a lot of those guys this year. Especially if for whatever reason you can't get Khalil Barnes heavy, then you'll see, or healthy, you'll see both of those guys a lot. But I think you're going to see Ricardo and Ronan kind of battling it out for playing time. I think Ricardo's a ball hawk, man. I think he's going to end up being a really good player for Clemson. Tom Allen defenses do a lot of blitzing. They're known for bringing some pressure. Yeah. He'll bring the pressure. They ranked very highly in tackles for loss and sacks last year while he was at Penn State. And, at least on paper, he's got more talent to work with at Clemson right now than he did at Penn State. How deep is Clemson's defensive line rotation? They can probably go. You got Capehart and Woods starting on the interior, and then you can probably go 3 more behind that. Was Stephon Green, Vic Burley, and one of those other guys, maybe Amari. Probably not Amari Adams, seeing as he sprained ankle in camp, but one of those other guys, Heaven Brown Schuler or somebody like that. They're not quite as deep on the edge, though. Big reason why Dabo had to go to the portal and sign Will Help from Purdue, because that was arguably the weakest spot on the defense last year was the defensive end spot or opposite of TJ Parker. They had a really hard time setting the edge. And if you look past Help on the roster, it's still the same guys from last year, plus Darian Mayo, who's a redshirt freshman now, who redshirted last year. I'm not even sure where he is from a developmental standpoint right now, how much they're planning on him contributing this year. Jaheim Lawson is probably going to be the third defensive end. Showed a lot of promise last year, but also had some struggles with his run defense and back again to setting the edge. But, man, they've really talked him up during fall camp. So we'll see where he is. But I'd say they're deeper on the interior than on the outside. If one of those ends goes down, I think they might be in trouble. Will I be doing a preview on Fridays before the game and have a special guest to preview it also? No. No. I'm not sure what I don't. We used to do last year. We did we do a little thing. If I was in town when they did it, it'd be me and Vandervoort and our boss Robert, and kind of preview the game. Sometimes it'd just be the two of them if I wasn't in town. I'm not sure how we're going to handle that this year. Might just be me and Will doing it sometimes, but there will not be like a live on Friday nights with a guest or anything like that. Speaking of guests, plan is to have Brandon Ford, former tight end, back here next Monday, but I kind of came to the realization during baseball season, man, that 2 shows during the week, 2 podcasts during the week, especially when you do them live, it's a lot. It doesn't really sound like a lot, and I didn't think it was a lot, man, but when you, especially the way I travel, and you've got to be at home in front of the laptop at 7 o'clock on Mondays and 7 o'clock on Thursday. It's a lot, man. Friday's a travel day a lot of the time, so we wouldn't be able to do it on Fridays anyways, for road games and stuff. But we'll see what we do with the little preview thing, if me and Will is going to do any of that this year. If we do, it'll be pre-recorded and loaded to YouTube and then put on the site. But as far as live stuff on a week-to-week basis, it's just going to be the Monday thing from now. I'm not saying we won't ever do something like on a Thursday maybe or something, but at this point, there's no plan to do anything regularly. Where is the wild numbers coming from with LSU having 2,000 to 3,000 tailgating, then everyone sell their spots? The numbers I've heard are not 2,000 to 3,000. It's higher than that. I've heard a lot of LSU fans are coming here without tickets, without parking passes. I can't tell you what their plan is. I've heard from multiple people that they're expecting tons of LSU fans in here this weekend. They need to get off to a fast start offensively, come out and put pressure on LSU quarterback because he is known to crumble under pressure. Yeah, perfect world. Yeah, you come out, get off to a fast start, and go up 2 scores. I think that would be I think that'd be the path a lot of people would want to see them take. It definitely amps up the pressure on the opponent for sure. And again, I know I keep going back to LSU having to replace 4 offensive linemen, but I think that's a big deal. Maybe it's something they overcome. But more often than not, when a team has to replace 4 starters along its offensive line, it takes some time for that group to gel. I can't. I don't know about his availability yet. I lean towards thinking he's going to play. My question is he 100%? And if not, how close he is to it. Not going to believe anything Dabo says. We heard Randall was great last fall camp too, and look what happened in the opener. We shall see. He's been burned too many times the last 4 years or so. You gotta. All right. First and foremost, I'm basing my opinion my opinion is not based on anything Dabo Swinney said. Number 2, you have to learn how to kind of decipher Dabo, man. You can't just listen to the words. You have to a good way to know how much Dabo believes in something during the spring or through the fall is, throughout the entire course of one fall, how many times he brings it up without being asked. Another good way is listening to his tone, how adamant he is about it, not just talking, but how adamant he is about what he's talking about. And to me, one of the biggest things are the way he talks about a kid. It's kind of hard to explain, but a lot of time there's a way to decipher and tell the difference between when he's just sunshine pumping or really believing in something. But again, my belief in Randall has nothing to do with anything Dabo said. Clemson 30-24, Larry says. Brian says 45-31 Clemson. Jay's got Clemson. Nope, Jay's got LSU. I thought you were an LSU fan when you asked me that earlier. 38-17 LSU. Hard Time says 31-20 Clemson. Linebacker play has to be on it. LSU wants to get the ball out quick to negate the pass rush. Absolutely. That'll be part of it. Test Clemson by throwing to the running backs, which will act as their run game, have to rally to the ball. How can I say this? I like the duo of Sammy Brown and Wade Wood as a little more than the duo of Barrett Carter and Wade Wood as. It just, I don't know. It seemed to me that Carter kind of regressed a little bit over his last couple of years. But man, Sammy Brown strikes me as a guy that, and for that matter, Wade Wood has too. They both kind of strike me as guys that are extremely driven and hungry to kind of go out and prove some of the stuff we saw from the linebackers last year is not something you're going to see this year. Lawson's not beating out help. Yeah, Colorado. Georgia Tech plays Colorado. Appreciate that. I couldn't remember. Hoping that the home field advantage will help to get the win. The fans are definitely out to prove that it's the true Death Valley. I think it will be a close win for Clemson 27-24. Hoping for a bigger spread, though. Dabo's kind of been a little tame in some of this stuff, about the Death Valley, who's the real Death Valley. About the most he said is use Google, you can use Google or whatever. If Clemson wins this game Saturday night, I got a feeling he's probably going to say something about it in the little thing they do with the coach on television post game with the winning coach. But they got to win it first. That is something I would keep an eye on post game celebration if Clemson were to win. Fowler and Herbie are calling the game because they love the Clemson environment. However, because Corso wanted to broadcast his last show somewhere else, I don't know how that worked. I don't know if Herbie and Fowler got to choose which game they called this week. They tend to do the primetime game, and this was the primetime game on ABC. But I go back to what I said earlier. I don't understand why they didn't have Corso's last appearance at Florida State. It just to me that would have been kind of the perfect ending. I hate that they're going up to Ohio State and doing that game on a game that's not even going to be broadcast on their network. I never understand why they go do game day. At least 99% of the time, I never understand why they go do game day at a game that they're not broadcasting. Man, it makes no sense to me. It is what it is, though. I would have much rather seen Corso's last game, because he played at Florida State. It's a quarterback there. I'd have much rather seen it. His last one be down there in Tallahassee. Yeah, Hurricane Hannafin. We'll see if that picks up any steam. How confident am I in the punter? I don't know what to expect from the punter, man. I'm not even 100% certain. I think we'll probably see Jack Smith, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I can tell you what I saw with my own eyes. And I know the punting in the first scrimmage was probably a little bit worse than Dabo led on after that thing. We're allowed to go into 3 practices. We get to watch the first 2. We got to watch 6.5 periods, and they did some punting both of those days. To me, Robert Gunn was the better punter those 2 days, and it was a very, very small sample size. It was just a few punts each guy, and Jack Smith probably had the longer punts, but Guns had more hang time and looked better coming off his foot. McCune actually had the best kick of them all. It's like a 55, 56 yarder with a hang time of 5.1, something like that. But he was also the most inconsistent of the 3. But I lean towards thinking it's going to be Jack Smith. And if Clemson can if he can get the ball, if he could just get it 43, 44, 45 yards with all the angst people have with the punting, I think he'll be good, but I don't recall very, very, very many seasons where um, the a team's success comes down to who's doing the punting. Fortunately, um, yeah, that's probably one of the things I'm kind of anxious to see, man. Man, how much of a disaster would it be if Jack Smith rolls out there and his first punt goes off the side of his foot and travels 15 yards? Key says LSU tight end Green will be the X factor. They also poached Oklahoma, wasn't it? I think it's Oklahoma's tight end. I forget his name, but I think he led the Sooners in catches and receiving yards last year. TJ was big as a freshman. I can see Mayo being big in year 2. Thoughts on Mayo? I understand Coach really rode him during camp. Did he take to the hard coaching? Yeah, Rump actually coaches all those guys hard. So I mean, it's not just Mayo, but yeah, man, he's and it wasn't just this year; it was last year too, man. He was on Mayo. You can tell they're trying to get him ready. And he's Mayo's 6'7", 255, 260 pounds. I mean, he is a big, long dude. A defensive end, that kind of length can be, used against you, and he'll have to learn and playing with leverage and those kind of things. Listening to Rump talk, I might have talked about this before. If I did, I apologize. But listening to Rump talk back at the media day, I just got the impression that Mayo just wasn't quite there yet. Now, Vandervoort listens to the same thing, and he gets the opposite impression that, yeah, he's ready to roll. So I lean towards thinking, maybe you can use Mayo situationally this year at the very least, and anything more than that, that's gravy. But I made no bones about it. I think he's got a really high ceiling. Just needed some coaching up once he got here. How do LSU's DBs match up with Clemson wide receivers? I think LSU's I read that backwards. I thought you was asking me how do LSU's wide receivers match up with Clemson's DBs. Other way around. Another spot where, believe it or not, LSU added some portal guys, particularly at safety. At least one corner too. But I think Clemson's got one of the best groups of receivers in the country. Kind of the same thing I said about I lost my train of thought there. What I said about LSU earlier. I think they're going to be a hard matchup for any secondary they play all season long. And just as important as I think it is for Clemson's defensive line to harass Nussmeier, I think it's just as important for LSU's to do the same thing to Klubnik. You do not want to get those wide receivers too much time to get open, because if you do, they're going to get open. I think Clemson can go 6 deep at receiver, at least 5, possibly 6. I think you'll see Antonio, Wesco, TJ Moore, that first 3, and then, you can rotate in Tristan Smith and Tyler Brown. And with Tyler Brown and Antonio, it gives you probably 2 of the better slot receivers in the country, and then Cole Turner as that 6th guy. But and it also allows Clemson to keep those guys fresh. And LSU will be able to do the same thing because they're deep at receiver too. But I think that is kind of I think that you're asking me about LSU secondary. I think their secondary is going to be pretty good. Make no mistakes. I kind of see it as a strength versus strength. Um, I'd give a slight edge to those receivers, though. And I'd say that about LSU's receivers against Clemson secondary, too. What will Clemson do now for a running back commit in the 2026 class? I don't think that's decided yet. Seeing as really the only guy you're expected to lose is Randall. Um, Everybody else will be back. I mean, I don't think it's imperative that Clemson goes out and lands some big time running back in 26. Um, Maybe they decide to grab one from the portal. Um, the the running back out of Alabama, the Jay Allen Terry kid, texted me yesterday and told me that he was no longer able to visit for this game, so he won't be there. But yeah, I don't know that they even know what they're going to do yet. I don't think they're in a big that. I don't think they're in some big rush to do anything because again, the portal's a tool now, and if you have to, you can go get one out of there. But it's assuming Clemson doesn't lose 2-3 guys to the portal after the season. It's not like you're hurting for depth. Dale says Clemson 31-20. The Hokie Center has a ton of snaps, but not any of them with D4. Yeah, they've got 2 transfer offensive linemen. One of them was a center at Virginia Tech last year. He's played a bunch at center and guard, and then their other guy, I think he came from Northwestern, and he's played 2 different spots over the past 2 years. A lot of experience, but again, they've not played together. And I think that makes a difference. I'm not saying it's impossible to overcome, but more often than not, it takes an offensive line time to gel. Any news on Haynes? He's been in green all of fall camp. Limited. He's been able to do drills and stuff, but no live contact. I wouldn't expect to see him in the first game. Key says 42-35 LSU. What is the level of concern with linebacker depth? Long as you don't start accumulating injuries, I think they're okay there. That's where they added Jeremiah Alexander from the portal. You get McLeod back, who I think fans probably underestimate a little bit. You get McLeod back after he was injured last year. D. Creighton's back. So as long as they don't start, accumulating injuries, I think they'll be okay. Has Spiller made any comments on Randall this? We've only gotten Spiller to one time back at the annual media event right before the ACC kickoff. Yeah, he was asked about Randall that day a bunch of times. I can't remember what all he said. Yeah, I'd have to go back and watch it. My memory's too bad, man. That's been more than a month ago now. Linebackers are going to be Woodaz and Sammy Brown. Edwards says, go Tigers. Capacity of Clemson Stadium, 81,500. All right, I just saw something, and here we go. believe LSU's QB has an injury, but they're being hush-hush about it. Nah, that was some internet rumor, man, that got way overblown. According to Brian Kelly, anyways, he just had a little bit of tendonitis. He's been back. He's been back full go. I think they held him out, not because of an injury or anything. I just think they held him out of the last practice of camp or something. Maybe I heard Brian Kelly talking about it today. They didn't want him throwing too much, but that he'll be a full participant in camp next week. If Clemson wins, do I think the fans will wait to storm the field per the new ACC rules? Probably not. And I'll tell you this, that's a quick way to get them to stop doing it altogether. They're not going to pay those fines. If the fans won't wait, it'll go away. Simple as that. Matter of fact, I am very surprised that it didn't go away anyways. I was kind of led to believe earlier this year that was going to be a thing of the past, that it had just gotten to be too much of a liability, and it was just something bad waiting to happen. But it is not going away yet. They are going to give the fans the opportunity to keep it around. I do not have a lot of confidence that the fans will do what is asked of them, though. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. They have not named a punter yet. Probably going to be Jack Smith. Yeah, Bauer Sharp. That's the guy I was thinking of, the tight end they got from Oklahoma. Who do I expect to be first out there for returns? I lean towards thinking it's going to be Randall. Maffa was the kick returner last year, Shipley the year before that. I lean towards thinking Adam Randall. Esley says 35-31 Clemson. Allen says 27-21 Clemson. Jason don't think the ACC should pursue some Big 12 teams if Clemson gets off to a fast start. My score would be Clemson 38-17. No, I don't think Clemson should pursue any Big 12 teams. Clemson wins, Clemson paying that fine. Yeah, but they're not going to continue to pay it, man. They're not going to do it. I can tell you that. I know that for a fact. They're not going to pay that thing game after game after game after game. If it happens more than a couple of times, don't be surprised. Man, I appreciate all the LSU fans that hopped in here tonight. And I didn't see any. I didn't see any troll comments or anything like that. I very much appreciate that. I'm not used to that from some of the opposing fan base. I usually try to keep it kind of straight up in here, man. So much appreciated. Before we pop out of here, I want to thank our sponsor over at A-Glass. 2 locations in the PD, 1 in Florence, 1 in Sumter. They take care of all your auto glass needs, replacement, repair. Get yourself a free quote today, myaglass.com. Plan right now is to have former Clemson tight end Brandon Ford back here with us next Monday to recap everything from the weekend, whether it be a Clemson win, Clemson loss. We'll have it for you. Again, I want to appreciate everybody that tuned in. We had a big crowd in here tonight. Special thanks to you LSU folks for getting in here and hanging around, man. We appreciate that too. Special thanks to all the regulars here every Monday night. Right back here next Monday.